Under Kentucky's pitch-black sky, where Fort Campbell's wild fields stretched like an endless tapestry, a frigid night in early 1987 etched itself into Jake Miller's mind. A 22-year-old soldier fresh from dusty months in Honduras, Jake had returned to the U.S. to Fort Campbell, 130 miles southwest of Fort Knox. More than a military base, it was a labyrinth of dense forests and grasslands where platoons trained under moonlight, footsteps mingling with wind hissing through trees. A communications specialist with neatly cropped brown hair, curious eyes, and a half-smirk, Jake was quick with jokes to mask the bitterness of MREs like greasy ground beef, which he swore was better as a weapon than food. Newly transferred from Fort Bragg, North Carolina, Jake was adjusting to life at the base. Assigned a rare gem, a small apartment in a converted warehouse, he grinned to comrades. Lucky me, no bunking in barracks with some guy snoring like a Humvee engine. The cramped space, tinged with old paint scent, offered solace after long days fixing radios and enduring a lieutenant's grumbles that maps are never wrong, only the readers are. But that night, hauling a basket of clean laundry from a nearby laundromat, an eerie sensation, like an unseen whisper, stopped him cold in the empty parking lot. The western sky, where Fort Campbell's fields melted into darkness, flared with an alien light. Jake looked up, breath fogging in the icy air. At first, he pegged it for the familiar red and white glow of a Chinook helicopter, a common sight roaring over the base even at ungodly hours. Probably Air Force pilots camping at the Hilton, flying for kicks, he muttered, smirking at the thought of them sipping Starbucks in the cockpit. But then, drawn by an invisible force, his eyes locked onto something else. Not the moon, not a plane, not anything from his 3 years in the army. It hovered hundreds of feet up, a radiant cube, as if forged from pure white light, glinting like crystal under stage lights. Its surface seemed transparent, yet a blinding glow pulsed from within, outshining the pale moon on the horizon. Jake froze, laundry basket heavy in his hands, a chill racing down his spine. Not from winter's bite, but from what he saw. What the hell is this? He wondered, mind reeling between doubt and curiosity. He'd heard Kentucky tales, Kentucky Goblin, the Mantell UFO incident. But they were campfire yarns swapped over Budweiser and barracks laughter. Now, in the parking lot, Jake wasn't laughing. The object made no sound, no engine roar, no rotor's whine. It hung there, motionless, defying every physics lesson from basic training. Jake rubbed his eyes, wondering if sleepless nights tinkering with radios in Honduras had tricked his brain. But the cube remained, blazing, unflinching, as if watching him from a distant void. He glanced around, desperate for a comrade, a local, anyone to confirm he wasn't losing it. The lot stayed empty, only wind whistling past parked cars and faint neon buzzing from the laundromat. He looked back, trying to gauge the object's size. From his view, it was basketball-sized at arm's length, but its true distance, hundreds of feet or a mile, was unclear. Jake had seen planes, drones, even meteors on Fort Campbell patrols, but nothing moved or looked like this. If this is some Air Force secret test, he thought, they owe me a Big Mac for the heart attack. Area 15 crossed his mind, but he dismissed it, blaming too many X-Files episodes in the base rec room. Then, as if asserting its presence, the cube flashed a fiery orange-red burst from its lower edge, like a jet engine's flame. It flared and vanished in a blink, leaving Jake gaping, heart pounding. He stood rooted, waiting, and it flashed again, a brief streak, as if the object breathed. The light wasn't like any flare, beacon, or army gear he knew. Jake felt an odd connection, as if the cube knew he watched, as if it wanted him to see. He noticed Chinooks, their red and white lights blinking, veering toward the cube. They see it too, Jake thought, relief mixing with tension. If the military was chasing it, he wasn't hallucinating. But he couldn't shake the sense that this thing didn't belong to his world, to Fort Campbell, or any base on American soil. The cube hung there, radiant, unmoving, a reminder that some things outstripped a young soldier's grasp, no matter his M16 or MRE jests. That night, in the desolate parking lot, Jake Miller stepped into a mystery that would haunt him for years. He didn't know this moment was just the beginning, that Kentucky's skies held more secrets, and that Fort Campbell, with its wild fields and dark forests, would never let him forget. Under Fort Campbell's silent Kentucky night sky, where darkness cloaked the wild fields like an endless veil, Jake Miller stood frozen, laundry basket heavy in hand, eyes locked on an otherworldly object. In that moment, January 1987's biting cold rendered his 3 years of Army life, from Fort Bragg's grueling drills to Honduras' sleepless radio checks, useless against what he witnessed. Hovering in the western sky was a radiant cube, unlike anything in military manuals or barracks campfire tales. It bore no blinking lights of planes, no roaring engines like the Chinooks common at the base. Its surface, transparent as crystal, pulsed with blinding white light from within, outshining the pale moon on the horizon. The glow wasn't just bright. It felt alive, throbbing, defying every physics rule Jake knew. He stood rooted, breath fogging in the chill, a shiver racing down his spine, not from winter's bite, but from the object's eerie presence. A soldier's humor flickered to quell fear. If this is an Air Force secret, they owe me a Budweiser, no, a whole case for this shock. The jest faded as the cube flared a fiery orange-red burst from its lower edge, like a sci-fi jet engine from movies Jake watched in North Carolina theaters. The streak blazed and vanished in a blink, leaving him gaping, heart pounding. He rubbed his eyes, wondering if Honduras's sleepless nights had tricked his mind. But the cube flashed again, a brief, fiery pulse, like a giant machine's breath. It wasn't a flare, beacon, or any army gear from drills. Jake glanced up, noticing Chinook helicopters' red and white lights veering toward the cube. Relief mixed with tension surged. They see it too, he thought, gripping the laundry basket's handle. If the military was chasing it, he wasn't hallucinating. Yet, he couldn't shake the sense that this thing didn't belong to his world, Kentucky's fields, or any U.S. base. The cube hung motionless, a cold challenge, as if it knew it outstripped human machines. He tried gauging its size, but the vague distance baffled him. It looked basketball-sized at arm's length, but could be hundreds of feet or a mile away. No way to tell. Jake had seen F-16s roar overhead, drones loop in tests, even meteors on patrols. But nothing moved or looked like this. No sound, no rotation, no hint it was man-made. Nothing moves like that, he thought, mind swirling between doubt and curiosity. Not F-16s, not drones, not anything in Uncle Sam's arsenal. Then, without warning, the cube shot across the sky, a white streak tearing the night. It didn't accelerate or arc like planes, just leaped instantly, as if space and time didn't apply. It stopped abruptly, a mile away, hovering silently, its white glow unwavering. Jake felt an odd connection, as if it knew he watched, as if it wanted him to see. He stood motionless in the empty lot, the laundromat's neon flickering faintly behind. In that moment, he wasn't a soldier with an M16 and MRE quips. He was a witness, drawn into a mystery beyond his training. The cube lingered, blazing like a beacon in the dark. Jake's racing pulse synced with the occasional orange-red flashes. He recalled tales, Kentucky Goblin, Pilot Thomas Carter's fatal chase of a strange object near Fort Knox decades ago. Once poker table jokes, they now felt vivid, sharp, terrifying. He glanced at the Chinooks, now mere specks, futilely approaching what they couldn't reach. What are they doing? Jake wondered, helplessness blending with fierce curiosity. And why am I here seeing this? That frigid Fort Campbell night, Jake Miller faced a mystery that forever changed how he viewed the sky. The cube, with its blinding light and impossible motion, wasn't just an unidentified object. It was a reminder that, even in the military's planned and controlled world, some things lay beyond human grasp. In the enveloping darkness of Fort Campbell, Kentucky, where wild fields merged with the night like an endless ocean, Jake Miller stood motionless, eyes fixed on a radiant cube hovering in the sky. That January 1987 night, with its skin-cutting cold, turned the empty parking lot into a stage for an unthinkable chase. Chinook helicopters, their red and white lights flickering like lost stars, tilted and sliced through the air, veering toward the strange object's new position. Their engines' roar echoed, but seemed puny against the cube's eerie silence, a presence not of this world. Jake, a young soldier with 3-year service, felt yanked into a Hollywood sci-fi flick, like Close Encounters of the Third Kind, watched back at Fort Bragg's rec room, where his platoon guzzled coke and debated aliens. But this wasn't a movie. This was Fort Campbell, where the weirdest thing expected was a lieutenant lost in a night drill, clutching an upside-down map and a dead radio. The cube, with its blinding white light and crystal-clear surface, wasn't something a soldier's quip or a Budweiser could explain. It hung there, still after its dizzying leap, as if watching, daring human minds to grasp it. The object moved again, darting at an angle, a white streak ripping the night. No acceleration, no smooth arc, just an instant jump, unbound by space or time. It stopped abruptly, a mile away, hovering silently, its orange-red glow beneath pulsing steadily, like a colossal machine's heartbeat. Jake's pulse raced, syncing with the object's strange rhythm. He'd seen F-16s thunder in drills, drones glide through night vision, but nothing moved like this. Nothing could. The Chinooks, with the U.S. military's mechanical might, chased but fell further behind. Jake, laundry basket heavy in hand, nearly laughed at the chase's futility. It's toying with them, he thought, picturing the object trolling the army like his buddies hid a sergeant's favorite MRE. Area 15 flashed in his mind with a soldier's wry humor. If Nevada's gray suits are behind this, they've got a sick sense of humor, Will mused, but the grin faded as reality hit. No tech, however secret, explained this. The pursuit lasted minutes, but felt like a lifetime to Jake. The cube shifted directions, north, east, southwest, each leap precise, unhesitating, as if mapping an invisible grid across Kentucky's sky. The Chinooks, despite twin engines and seasoned pilots, were mere specks, flailing to keep up. The cube's orange-red flashes taunted, flaunting its superiority. Jake felt a strange connection, as if it knew he watched, as if it wanted him to witness humanity's machines falter. Finally, as if bored, the cube shot west, so fast Jake saw only a fading streak vanish into the night. It was gone, leaving no trace, as if it never existed. Jake stood, eyes locked on the last glint, breath fogging in the cold. He waited, hoping or fearing it would return. But nothing. Only wind whistled across the fields, carrying winter's bite, and his heart pounded in his chest. He glanced at the Chinooks, now resuming their patrol, their lights dim, as if they too were rattled by what happened. Jake felt small, not as a soldier in a sprawling base, but as a witness to something beyond human ken. He recalled tales. Thomas Carter, the pilot killed chasing a strange object near Fort Knox decades ago. Red eyes in Fort Campbell's woods his comrades swore they saw. Once poker table jests, they now felt vivid, sharp, terrifying. In the empty lot, the laundromat's neon flickering behind, Jake stood as if he'd crossed an unseen line where reality and fiction blurred. That night, Kentucky's sky showed Jake an unsolvable mystery. The cube, with its blinding light and impossible motion, wasn't just an unidentified object. It was a reminder that, even in the military's controlled world, some things eluded grasp. Jake didn't know if he'd see it again or if Fort Campbell's wild fields and dark forests would keep such secrets. But one thing was certain. This moment would haunt him forever, like the orange-red flashes pulsing in his memory, never fading. In the biting cold of that January 1987 night, as the radiant cube vanished into Fort Campbell's western darkness, Jake Miller stood frozen in the empty parking lot, eyes locked on the void where the last glimmer faded. The wind's howl through Kentucky's wild fields carried a strange loneliness, as if the world had glimpsed the impossible but refused to acknowledge it. The heavy laundry basket in his hand anchored him to reality, while his mind drifted in a sea of unanswered questions. The sky, now just pale moonlight and scattered stars, seemed to guard the secret it had briefly revealed. Jake turned slowly, and in that moment he realized he wasn't alone. A small crowd had gathered in the lot, silent figures emerging from the shadows like ghosts. Fellow soldiers, some still in army jackets, stared with a mix of confusion and curiosity. Locals were there too, a burly man, likely a trucker in a crooked cap, his face flushed from cold, gazing skyward as if expecting the object's return. An older woman, clutching a sweater, shook her head, eyes lost. They stood apart, yet bound by an invisible thread, awe at what had passed overhead. Jake caught the trucker's eye, the man muttering something unintelligible. Jake shrugged, feigning calm, a soldier's habit for facing the uncontrollable. Probably an Air Force test, he thought, tempted to say it aloud to break the stifling silence. Or a UFO, who knows? The thought came as a jest, but his voice, had he spoken, would have betrayed the calm he clung to. In 3 years of service, Jake had learned that sometimes the best way to handle the bizarre was to act like it was nothing, like laughing when a lieutenant got lost in the woods with an upside-down map, or when a radio died mid-drill. But no one in the crowd responded. No laughs, no arguments, no attempts at rational excuses. They just stared at the sky as if hoping the cube would return to prove they hadn't imagined it. Then, as if guided by an unseen signal, the group dispersed. The trucker trudged to his rig, boots crunching on gravel in the stillness. The sweater-clad woman hurried off, as if fleeing the memory. Soldiers lowered their heads, slipping back to barracks, silently agreeing no explanation was worth voicing. Jake lingered a moment, feeling part of a shared secret no one dared admit. He hefted his laundry basket, heading to his small apartment in the converted warehouse, his mind swirling with indelible images: the blazing cube, pulsing orange-red light, the Chinook's futile chase. The apartment, with its old paint smell and flickering fluorescent light, greeted him with familiar quiet. Jake flipped on the TV, hoping for an urgent news flash about a strange object over Kentucky, something to confirm he wasn't mad. But the screen showed only a Burger King ad, a glistening Whopper mocking his unease, and a rerun football game he'd seen a dozen times. He sank into a chair, still clutching the basket's handle, feeling the outside world ignored what had happened. The next day at Fort Campbell, life rolled on. Sergeants barked in the training yard, Humvees growled, and mess hall banter about pulverized chicken MREs echoed, but no one mentioned the cube. No comrade recounted the strange light. No lieutenant slipped a question about the previous night. Jake, burning with curiosity, stayed silent too. He recalled a sergeant's tale of forest demons near Fort Campbell, red eyes lurking in trees, which sparked platoon laughter and a month of teasing. They'd think I'd lost it, Jake mused, scanning familiar faces in the barracks. Or worse, slap me with a psych uval for UFO talk. The silence, though stifling, held a strange power. It reminded him that in the military's planned, controlled world, some things weren't probed. Jake felt caught between realities: Fort Campbell's rules and laughter, and the night sky's blazing cube with its unanswerable questions. He thought of Kentucky's lore, Kentucky Goblin, pilot Thomas Carter's fatal chase near Fort Knox. Once poker table jests, they now felt alive, a warning this land held more secrets than he'd imagined. That night, on his narrow apartment bed under a flickering fluorescent, Jake sensed a change within. The cube wasn't just an unidentified object. It was a doorway to a world where reality and fiction blurred. He didn't know if he'd see it again, or if Fort Campbell's wild fields and dark forests would challenge him with new mysteries. But one thing was clear: the crowd's silence, the base's and his own, would never erase the pulsing orange-red light in his memory. In the days following that eerie night when the radiant cube vanished into Fort Campbell's sky, Jake Miller couldn't shake the image of its blinding white light and pulsing orange-red glow. His small apartment, with its old paint smell and flickering fluorescent bulb, became a temporary refuge, but it couldn't stop the flood of questions. Each night on his narrow bed, he found himself lost in the memory of the unidentified object, as if it had branded an invisible mark on his life. Fort Campbell, with its wild fields and dark forests, was no longer just a military base. It was a land harboring secrets beyond a young soldier's grasp. Raised near Fort Campbell, Jake knew the local lore that drifted through Kentucky's small towns, where folks gathered on porches, sipping Folgers and spinning tales as if they were gospel. Most vivid was the 1955 Kelly-Hopkinsville encounter, when a family claimed attack by small, goblin-like creatures with pointed ears and glowing eyes. As a kid, Jake and friends had laughed it off, but now it carried a darker hue. He recalled that Fort Campbell's security team investigated, and the connection chilled him. Was this land a magnet for the inexplicable, or just a breeding ground for imaginations steeped in forest shadows? His most haunting memory was the 1948 Mantell incident, read in tattered paperbacks in the barracks rec room, during long nights awaiting a lieutenant's orders. Near Fort Knox, 130 miles away, Captain Thomas Carter, a seasoned National Guard pilot, died chasing a bright, unidentified object. The Air Force's dry report called it a skyhook balloon, or Venus's reflection. Jake, with a soldier's skepticism, didn't buy it. He'd seen Venus twinkle like a distant star on patrols, and it didn't dart like a jet or drive a pilot to deadly altitudes. Balloons don't kill people, he thought, recalling heated UFO debates with comrades over Budweiser's faint aroma. The Mantell incident, though nearly 4 decades old, mirrored Jake's experience eerily. Both unfolded near Kentucky military bases, where skies seemed to guard untamed secrets. Both involved radiant objects moving in defiance of physics. Both saw the military, Carter's P-51, Jake's Chinooks, chase futilely, left powerless. Yet a stark difference gnawed at Jake. Carter paid with his life, his plane spiraling to doom, while Jake stood helpless in a parking lot, laundry basket grounding him in shattered normalcy. This didn't bring relief, but unease, making him wonder if he teetered on the edge of a vaster mystery Carter never lived to unravel. Jake couldn't help linking his experience to other Fort Campbell moments he'd once dismissed as fatigue or fancy. On night patrols through wild fields, he'd glimpsed red eyes lurking behind trees, vanishing before he could flip on night vision. On windless nights, when forests fell eerily still, he'd heard sourceless whispers, as if something called his name from afar. Why do I keep running into this stuff? He wondered, feeling drawn into a vortex of strange phenomena, as if Fort Campbell had chosen him as an unwilling witness. He recalled Barrack's jests, when a sergeant's forest demon tale sparked laughter and months of ribbing, and wondered if his silence was to avoid ridicule, or because he wasn't sure what he'd seen. Kentucky's sprawling fields and dark forests seemed to hold a strange power, beckoning the inexplicable. Jake thought of other tales, odd lights, fleeting shadows, whispered by locals in roadside diners, where cornbread and coffee scents mingled. He considered Fort Campbell's history, a base that prepped soldiers for Vietnam and tested secret military tech. Did the Army know something about these events but hide it, like stashing pulverized chicken MREs to dodge complaints? Or was this land, with its turbulent past and uncharted mysteries, simply a hotspot for the unknowable? Jake had no answers, but the ties to history, Carter, the Kentucky Goblin, Forrest Red Eyes, made him feel less alone. He was part of a larger tale, one Fort Campbell's vast skies and deep shadows had woven through generations. He didn't know if the cube would return or if he'd face new mysteries. But one thing was certain, the memory of that night with its pulsing orange-red light and the crowd's silence would remain part of him, an invisible scar reminding him the world held secrets yet to be decoded. Under the flickering fluorescent light of his small Fort Campbell apartment, Jake Miller lay on his narrow bed, staring at the ceiling, where memories of the radiant cube lingered like an unshakable specter. Years had passed since that January 1987 night, when Kentucky's sky unveiled a mystery beyond his grasp. But time brought no answers, only deeper questions. Fort Campbell, with its wild fields and dark forests, had etched an indelible mark on Jake's mind, a reminder that some things in this world forever eluded human reach, no matter if you carried an M16 or a Budweiser to fend off fear. Now, out of the Army, Jake still chased clues. He pored over old UFO reports in libraries, revisiting the Mantell incident, Captain Thomas Carter's 1948 death pursuing a bright object near Fort Knox. The military's dry reports chalked it up to a skyhook balloon or Venus. Jake, honed by Army skepticism, couldn't believe a seasoned pilot like Carter died over a star. Nor could he accept that the cube he saw, blazing white, moving impossibly, was a natural phenomenon or Air Force test. He probed old comrades, those who'd patrolled Fort Campbell's fields with him, laughing over lost lieutenants or grimacing at pulverized chicken MREs. Over beers in local bars, some admitted to seeing strange lights at the base, streaks vanishing, vague shapes in the night, but none dug deeper. The Army doesn't like stories without clean endings, a sergeant once told Jake, voice low like he was spilling a forbidden truth, especially when they make us look like fools chasing ghosts. Those words rang true. In the military's planned, controlled world, mysteries like the cube had no place unless stamped "resolved" in red ink. Yet, Jake couldn't let go. He didn't know what the cube was, a secret Area 51 project, an undiscovered natural phenomenon, or something beyond human imagination, like the alien tales he'd scoffed at watching X-Files in the barracks. All he knew was it wasn't his last brush with Fort Campbell's strangeness. Other memories from night patrols resurfaced, red eyes lurking behind trees, sourceless whispers in the woods, moments that chilled him despite brushing them off as fatigue. Kentucky has a way of making you question everything, he'd think, half joking, as if the land held an invisible force, drawing mysteries no one dared face. The cube's story, though haunting, never found closure. Jake wondered if it tied to the Mantell incident, if Fort Campbell hid a grander secret in its wild fields and dark forests. Or was it just a young soldier's stressed mind, fresh from deployment, turning a strange light into a cosmic enigma? He had no answers and likely never would. But he felt a deeper truth. Fort Campbell, with its turbulent history and whispered tales, was where reality and fiction blurred, where the sky could reveal what no one was ready to believe. Jake knew this story, with all its ambiguity, would live in him, like the pulsing orange-red light in his memory. He thought of others, friends, family, anyone in America, who might have gazed at the sky and seen the unexplainable. He pictured them sharing tales in roadside diners or on porches, amid cornbread and coffee scents, as Kentuckians had for decades. And he hoped, faintly, that his story might inspire them to speak, so mysteries like the cube wouldn't be buried in silence.